inferior view of the skull. Inferior view of the skull consists from anteriorly by hard palate. The hard palate consists from the two parts: palatine process of the maxillary bone and horizontal plate of the palatine bone. Features of the hard palate: incisive foramen below incisor teeth or above incisor teeth, incisive foramen for passing nasopalatine nerve and sphenopalatine artery. Intermaxillary suture, palato-maxillary suture between the palatine bone and maxillary bone. Palato-maxillary suture. Great palatine foramen for great palatine nerve and vessel. Lesser palatine foramen for lesser palatine nerve and vessel. Posterior nasal spine, posterior nasal aperture. Posterior nasal aperture separate into two parts by vomer bone. Vomer bone. The lateral boundaries of the posterior nasal aperture: medial pterygoid plate. Medial pterygoid plate part from the sphenoid bone. Lateral pterygoid plate. Between medial and lateral pterygoid plate, pterygoid fossa. Below pterygoid fossa, scaphoid fossa. هنا عندي هذا basilar part of the occipital bone. Lateral to the basilar part of the occipital foramen formed by medial end of the petrous bone and greater wing of the sphenoid bone and basilar part of the occipital bone. This foramen named foramen lacerum. Foramen lacerum. Structure passing through this foramen: great petrosal nerve. Laterally groove. This groove for cartilaginous part of the auditory tube. Groove for cartilaginous part of the auditory tube or a second tube. This foramen oval in shape called foramen ovale. Structure passing through this foramen: mandibular branch of the trigeminal nerve and lesser petrosal nerve. Posterior and lateral to the foramen ovale, foramen spinosum. Structure passing through this foramen: middle meningeal artery, branch from the maxillary artery. Posterior to the foramen spinosum, carotid canal. Carotid canal. Structure passing through this canal: internal carotid artery. Direction: this canal direction forward and medially to reach foramen lacerum and internal carotid artery, partially passing through the foramen lacerum. This carotid canal carotid artery passing forward and medially to reach foramen lacerum and ascending from the superior part of the foramen lacerum. This canal called carotid canal for internal carotid artery. Here this foramen, jugular foramen, structure passing through this foramen, internal jugular vein and cranial nerve number 9, 10 and 11. Glossopharyngeal nerve, vagus nerve and cranial part of the accessory nerve. And internal jugular vein. This process called styloid process. Direction downward and forward. Styloid process. And this process mastoid process. The foramen between styloid and mastoid process, stylomastoid foramen. Structure passing through this foramen, facial nerve. Facial nerve, cranial nerve number 7, cranial nerve. This foramen, stylomastoid foramen, between styloid process and mastoid process. Another foramen here, hypoglossal foramen for hypoglossal nerve, cranial nerve number 12. This foramen, foramen magnum for spinal cord and its meninges, vertebral artery and spinal part of the accessory nerve. These structures passing through this foramen, foramen magnum. Another features here a depression or fossa called mandibular fossa for articulate with the coronoid process of the mandible to form temporomandibular joint, the only joint movable in the skull. Temporomandibular joint. And here a fissure named pterygopalatine fissure. Structure passing through this fissure, pterygotympanic fissure for the chorda tympani nerve. Pterygotympanic fissure for chorda tympani nerve. Chorda tympani nerve branch from the facial nerve. This groove name groove for occipital artery. Occipital artery passing through this groove, and name groove for occipital artery. This structure notch name mastoid notch. Mastoid notch for posterior belly of digastric muscle. This main features in the norma basalis. Thank you.